The Marvel Universe holds a massive grudge against its own heroes. So far, the Avengers, Deadpool, and the Punisher have had to contend with their fellow do-gooders getting in their way. Not to mention instances like Civil War and World War Hulk where the heroes often get in their own way. To date, the tortured X-Man Wolverine has clashed with a large swath of his Marvel comrades several times. But the events that unfold on Earth 11080, the setting of horror novelist Jonathan Maberry's Marvel Universe vs. Wolverine, inherit a tragic tone thanks to the origins of the conflict. A public, televised attack by Spider-Man, and before Wolverine can react, a plague is sweeping the population, turning those afflicted into cannibalistic monsters. The resulting story is a bloody but sincere tribute to the beastly X-Men, as well as a chance for readers to consider what's the worst Marvel can put Wolverine through. Chapter 1: A Fall of Angels. This is a tale of metahumans, but far from a superhero story. This is made clear from the somber tone of the first few panels. Wolverine, bathed in gloomy golden light, slays Marvel Girl. It's not immediately clear why the grizzled X-Man has done this, but it's clear things are just not right. Especially as nearby witnesses towering in the shadows springs into action. Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus, who lets out a bemoaning wail and punches Wolverine through a wall. The behemoth continues the assault with some targeted shots to Wolvie's face. However, instead of retaliating, Logan can't help but think back to some of his most cherished moments with Peter. He goes so far as to christen Colossus his best friend, and immediately drives his claws through the young mutant's chin. It's a horrifying moment that sets the tone for the rest of the series, and is probably a hugely traumatic moment even for someone as damaged as Logan. We're taken back to the day it all began when Colossus and Wolverine are chilling at the X-Mansion enjoying a hockey game on TV. As Logan describes it, "It was a nothing day. A Tuesday, I think. No heroics that day, no spandex villains, no worlds to save, just a day. We didn't know it then, but the last day of everything's cool and normal was yesterday." What a colossal statement, Wolvie, mind the pun. What gives Logan this idea? Well, Spider-Man and Rhino come crashing into the stadium, interrupting the game. This would seem to be a normal day in Marvel's New York City, but there was a problem. Rhino wasn't getting up from this one. The camera would catch a shot of Spidey feasting on his brutish rogue, thus alerting Wolvie, Colossus, and everyone else this wouldn't be a typical superhero story. Things would only get creepier after Wolverine joins forces with the Fantastic Four to investigate Spider-Man's condition. With the quartet having successfully contained the webhead to a cell in the Baxter building, Wolverine is able to examine the young hero up close. But Spidey just perches in the shadows, staring daggons, or claws, through the X-Man. It's clear that Peter Parker is different, but the specifics of the forthcoming plague remain unclear at this juncture. However, that doesn't stop Wolverine from recognizing a similar instinct in this new Spider-Man. Suddenly, Logan wasn't so certain that he was the hunter anymore. In fact, after hearing Reed Richards' description of Spidey's new normal, Wolverine was downright convinced that they were now the hunted. His whole metabolism appears to have completely adapted to this new state, even the increased production of enzymes for digesting raw meat. In essence, this isn't some random disease. Rather, Spidey has become a whole new creature, with his body developing an entirely new way of functioning. Yet with only one isolated subject, the heroes couldn't learn much, so Wolverine returned to the X-Men and things returned to normal. Logan would resume his heroic exploits and even take time to hit an underground Hydra base with Psylocke. It was a simple snatch and grab, and the two worked effectively together, successfully escaping with hardly any heat on them. But this would change when Psylocke got a little ahead of Logan and emerged through a manhole cover. Once Wolverine caught up, he'd hear Psylocke's cry and follow her, only to find her arm and blood smeared all over the scene. Reed and authorities would arrive, but it would largely be a lost cause. As Reed would tell a frustrated Logan, "It's one of the problems with our world. When everything's possible, there's every reason to be afraid." There were just too many possibilities and little else that can be done, but Wolverine is still unwavering, mainly since he felt responsible for watching Psylocke's back and he'd follow Psylocke's trail onto the rooftops. Sadly, only her remains were to be found. Wolverine would rejoin Ben Grimm, Hank Pym, Reed, and Susan Storm at the Baxter building. Once he got there, the heroes watched a news report detailing how a cannibalistic blob had attacked a restaurant. With the situation becoming more and more dire by the hour, Wolverine would enlist Beast's help in tracking down Psylocke's killer. They discovered that the perpetrator can fly. Otherwise, Wolverine would bear witness to more carnage as the condition continued spreading. He'd fight a handful of cannibalistic children before they overwhelmed a city street and even rescued a baby who was being kidnapped by one of the people eaters. Both of these instances rattled the cynical mutant but proved only an appetizer. Once the remaining heroes conferred with Cyclops, the X-Men leader dispatched Angel with vital scientific equipment. Well, a day later, the winged mutant still hadn't arrived, so Wolvie decides to follow Angel's transponder signal and figure out what's happened. Before he does, Pym and Reed take extra care to speak with Logan regarding the severity of the situation. Pym states, "We've run the math based on the number of outbreaks since Spider-Man became patient zero of this plague. This is going to break huge, which means that very soon we're going to long for the days of isolated murders, even of our friends." This proves rather prophetic. Wolvie arrives in Central Park after the last ping of Angel's transponder. He quickly decapitates an infected Doc Ock and spots the Quinjet that Angel had ferried the equipment with. But then, like a demented saintly entity, the infected Angel descends from the heavens and meets Wolverine's eyes. The monstrous former X-Man scoops Logan up, but the latter takes the chance to bring Angel down for good. Wolverine is shattered, but there's still more for him to see and do. He jumps into Angel's Quinjet and travels to the X-Mansion, his home, where a desperate group of freaks had become his family. There, illuminated by that eerie amber light, Wolverine would discover his family to have fallen to the disease and consequently be forced to wipe them out. The disease turned the afflicted into primitive predators, driven by hunger and rage. In short, Wolverine saw the worst of himself now forced upon his family. As he stood atop his friends' corpses, Wolverine struggled to justify his actions. "What choice did I have? I couldn't let them live like this. I couldn't condemn them to that kind of hell." If only Wolverine was spared the hell he'd endure in the coming days. Dubious allies, monstrous mega battles, and the revival of a bitter rivalry. Who could this rival be? Well, before Wolvie gears up to face him, make sure to subscribe to Plot Armor Comics and enable notifications so you never miss an upload. Now it's time for a squash match. Chapter 2. Squashing the Bug. The X-Men are now gone and more heroes fall by the hour, so who is left to combat this macabre epidemic? Wolvie, Reed, and Pym get their answer after the former returns to the Baxter building with some dire news. This plague will go worldwide within a matter of months, which is about how long it'll take to develop an antivirus. Plus, it's not even a disease, but rather a form of gene therapy. As Pym puts it, it's post-conflict science based on the premise that if you want to win a global nuclear war, then you have to adapt the survivors to live in such a world. Dubbing the condition Survivor 118, the science bros need a sample in order to engineer an antidote. A shipment of the material was being smuggled into the US 18 months earlier, but the scoundrels had met a particularly grisly end. The heroes recognize the MO, and Wolverine sets out to find the gunmen, who had undoubtedly been exposed to the compound. Meanwhile, Grimm has planted himself in front of the building cell, harboring an unhealthy interest in the captive Spider-Man. It's not a big deal yet. Let's just say Reed will regret not paying more attention to the thing later. Wolverine, despite the clarity of his mission, finds it difficult to ignore the chaos all around him. As a disparate group of Avengers combat a likewise dissimilar group of infected supers, Wolverine laments how much things have changed. "A week ago, I would have been in the thick of this. No thought, no hesitation. Pop my claws and bring some pain. Now I look at this and all I see is distraction." The scope of the havoc had finally dawned on the X-Men. While Angel's fall signaled the end of his mutant comrades, this brought home the fact that things weren't contained anymore. Daredevil, Kraven, Scorpion, and even Leapfrog had joined the fray. And everyone knows that things have gone to hell when the man Wolverine is seeking gets involved. Punisher, the vigilante with hardly an ability to his name beside an indomitable will to, well, punish. Wolvie, perched atop some old sign lettering, spies Frank Castle doling out agony and ammo alongside Hawkeye. As Logan hops down to join them, Clint Barton mistakes him for one of the monsters. Frank knows better though. "A monster, sure, but one of ours." The comic receives a noticeable jolt of electricity once Wolverine and Punisher share the page. The two have a lot in common, and as a result recognize what each other really is behind any idealistic facade. The battle continues and the three heroes stick together for the remainder. Once the bodies have fallen, Punisher has yet another great retort when Hawkeye invokes God in memoriam. "We don't need God. We need more ammunition." Frank's bloodlust must be put aside for the moment though, as Wolverine brings him up to speed. Punisher is initially resistant due to him simply not wanting to stop his one-man war on crime to provide the eggheads his Survivor 118 enriched blood. He reneges after Wolverine threatens to claw him though, which to be fair is the typical MO of the excitable X-Man. Plus, Castle recounts the hit on the smugglers from 18 months ago, remembering that he had gotten awfully sick from the compound. But he hadn't taken any with him, instead leaving the rest of the Survivor 118 to spill into a drain and thus explaining how the condition had spread so quickly. The only course of action left was to get the Punisher to the geeks in hope they could figure out a solution to the epidemic. The trek started off quiet, but things quickly escalated when Electro and Magneto's sparring match landed in their airspace. This brought a ton of monsters for Wolverine and the Punisher, but this proved only a distraction. After all, what happens when electricity and magnetism collide? A superhuman EMP darkening the entire city around the heroes. They flee the mob of monsters and reach the Baxter building only to find a gruesome scene awaiting them in the lobby. We're talking head-on-a-pike type stuff. It's clear something nasty has gone down, so Wolverine and Punisher creep their way up the stairs, the ladder's flare their only source of light. Everything's quiet, until Reed, stretched out along the walls, cries out to them. "Logan, they... Not much to go on, but it's enough for Wolfie and Punisher to ascend the rest of the tower with claws and guns at the ready. But they're too late to save anyone. The first thing they see is Spider-Man and Beast chowing down on the remains of Pym, the one man who had the aptitude to cure them. When Wolverine admonishes them for this, Spider-Man utters some revealing words. "This wizard wanted to hurt us, change us back, so I ate his heart." There was hardly anything left to say. Punisher and Wolvie resorted to kill all of the infected and engage the two. The Beast takes on Castle, but a well-placed shotgun blast takes care of the former X-Man. Wolverine tries to rough up Spidey, but the webhead is still too agile, even in this primitive state. Punisher tries to help, though Reed immediately intervenes to stop the attack, which allows Spidey to flee through a window. The Fantastic Four leader claims Spider-Man's status as Patient Zero makes him too valuable a scientific source to kill. They need his DNA to fix this thing. The three have barely caught their breath when another threat emerges from the shadows behind them. The Thing, accompanied by Red She-Hulk and Thundra, waiting to chow down on the three uninfected heroes. It seems Reed's pal had fallen under Spidey's influence and succumbed to the condition. But hey, it's 3-on-3. That's doable. Maybe this will end well for our heroes. Chapter 3. The Predator Rage. It does not end well for the heroes. In all fairness though, their numbers weren't the issue. Wolverine, out of all the times to try diplomacy, chooses the instance where he's squaring off with the cannibalistic metahumans. As one might expect, this ends with a clobbering from Grimm, though the Punisher smacks Thundra good with his gun. Wolverine reflects on the kinship he shares with Castle, and his words articulate why they are perfectly adapted for a world like this. "The Punisher and me. We may not like what we've become, but let's face it, for us, it was always about the hunt, and the kill, and the blood." He couldn't be more on the nose. Wolverine's traumatic history, similar to the Punisher's brokenness, grants them a savage nature capable of detaching them from their humanity entirely. But it's necessary in this world. And as Punisher lobs grenades and Wolvie slices through blood and bone, it becomes almost ethical to put these fallen heroes down. But the enemy is likewise willing to do anything, as demonstrated when Thing used Red She-Hulk as a shield against one of Punisher's explosives. The resulting blast levels the tower floor, but Wolverine, Punisher, and Reed survive and free T'Challa, who had partnered with the latter to research the epidemic. The two scientists recount what happened to lead to the attack on the Baxter building. A distress call from the lobby had warned T'Challa of Red She-Hulk's presence. The Black Panther would attempt to fight but be forced to flee back upstairs, only to be attacked by the now-turned Beast. Instead of feasting on the Wakandan king on the spot, T'Challa would be stored in some form of cocoon for consumption later. Grimm now turned, then freed Spider-Man, and T'Challa wouldn't be rescued until Wolverine and Punisher arrived. Afterward, Reed came to a startling conclusion. It must have taken Ben and Hank in a heartbeat. If it took them that quickly, then it can take any of us at any second. Another layer of tension added to the survivors' lives. Their turning was incredibly unpredictable and could strike when they least expected. The Punisher, immune thanks to his previous exposure, deposits some blood for Reed to study and sets out on a hunt. His target? Patient Zero. The other vial of blood Mr. Fantastic needs, Spider-Man. Wolverine, Reed, and T'Challa resolve to move the equipment to Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is where the latter believes his sister, Shuri, to be. However, the Thing turns out to have survived, and clutching Thundra eavesdrops nearby. Punisher continues his hunt for Spider-Man, enlisting the aid of Captain America, while Wolverine assists the scientist with the equipment. Meanwhile, the Thing reports to a large, shadowy figure regarding the survivors' activities. As T'Challa leads the way across the city, Wolverine ponders the lines this new world has redrawn. "We used to live in a world of good guys and bad guys. That was yesterday. Now it's us or them. If you're not eating people, then you're one of us." The sun sets, bathing the sky in hues of blood red, which coincidentally would also soon happen on the ground. Wolverine remained with Reed at the Baxter building where he fielded a lot of the genius's misgivings about their chances. Afterward, they rejoined T'Challa and the rest of the survivors, which included the likes of Captain America, Deadpool, the Human Torch, and Moon Knight. However, Falcon conducted some surveillance and discovered the cannibal forces were hot on their tail. To make matters worse, their leader was with them, the Hulk now clad with a skull necklace and assumedly hungry for puny heroes. Deadpool, as only he can, decides to allude to a renowned monster movie. "We're gonna need a bigger boat and a change of underoos." But Wolverine remains undeterred, popping his claws and trying his darnest to lead. "Okay, I don't like speeches, so this will be short. We kill anyone and anything that tries to cross. End of speech." Wolvie Cap's a lot better at speeches, and he's right over your shoulder. Could have just handed the mic to him, but no, this is a Wolverine story. And as such, it must end with a face-off with the Hulk. But before the two come to blows, the Human Torch attempts to set the cannibal forces ablaze. However, Hulk's thunderclap sends the hero rocketing away from the conflict where he endures a rather rough landing. Wolverine observes this as well as the surrounding warfare that leaves many a hero drenched in blood and comes to the sorrowful conclusion. Maybe this predator rage wasn't all that far below the surface of every one of us. Maybe the disease just let out what was already there. What Wolverine wasn't counting on was a massive demonstration of his words. The Human Torch, in an apparent fit of mania, goes nuclear as the last of the survivors exited the bridge. The supernova lit up the heavens as well as turned up the heat in Wolverine's duel with the Hulk. That predator rage took hold within the Jade Giant, empowering him to chomp off Wolverine's left arm. The grizzled mutant let out a guttural howl as his opponent towered over him, both charred by the inferno set loose in the sky. Though the survivors had escaped the bridge, Wolverine was not so lucky, plummeting to the bay below. Mutilated and scorched, death would have been welcomed by him, but he's the best there is at what he does, and this hellish world wasn't through with the best yet. Chapter 4. Death's Other Kingdom. The day Wolverine killed the X-Men, he spoke a prophecy. Despite everything he'd been through in more than a century of living, Logan realized how little he knew. "I've seen every kind of hell. I thought I knew what it truly was. I thought I'd learned all of its lessons. What did I know? Hell has so much more to teach us." And now hell had come to Earth with the Hulk as its devil. Wolverine's arm was merely a trophy now dangling from the cannibal leader's neck as he continued pursuing the survivors. The inferno he'd leave behind would put Dante to shame, but it wasn't enough to snuff out the hope that persisted in the water. Wolverine washed ashore somewhere beyond the bridge, far enough along to be recovered by Cap, Deadpool, and Punisher. The three returned Logan to the survivor staging ground where the mutant would be able to recuperate in relative safety. It would take time for Wolvie to regain his other arm, but thankfully the next move wasn't his to make. Instead, the survivor sent Deadpool to spy on the Hulk and his forces, since the troubled mutant possessed a healing factor and wasn't currently missing a limb. But there turned out to be something missing. Deadpool would dutifully carry out the surveillance requested of him, but he'd also nonchalantly chomp on a bone with meat. Turns out there's a good reason he never took his mask off. It's because he's one of them. But unlike the savages he's watching, Deadpool has apparently retained some portion of his human self. This is evidenced by his return to the survivors with valuable intel. The Hulk and his forces would move to take out the science team holed up in Elizabeth, New Jersey. It would be vital for the survivors to collide with the cannibal forces and slow them down long enough for the science team to evacuate. Despite Deadpool's proving to be on the up and up, Wolverine could literally smell that the merc with a mouth was not right. But Pool's healing factor, just like Wolverine's, proved effective in keeping the condition at bay. Thus, Wolverine perhaps felt a certain kinship with Pool, which led to the former declaring, "I know you ain't as crazy as you pretend. Not saying you ain't nuts, but I know you can keep it together when you have to. Now's that time. I'm trusting you because I need you. Don't make me regret it." Similarly, Punisher and Cap bond over their status as soldiers. Memorably, Punisher would implore Cap to ditch the Stars and Stripes and use lethal weaponry. In a move illustrative of the state of their world, Cap equips a rocket launcher and laments, "A good soldier knows how to adapt." 10 minutes later, the four survivors are in the thick of it, positioned beneath a J. Jonah Jameson billboard atop a building. Cap and Punisher engage with the incoming forces. However, there's a massive problem, more specifically, a lack of one. The Hulk is nowhere to be seen amongst the forces, which leads Wolverine to suspect the Jade Giant is hunting the scientists. Deadpool accompanies Logan at the Punisher's cold insistence to the Elizabethan seaport at Newark Airport, the current location of the research team. Sure enough, the two don't make it far before they spot some sort of projectile shooting up into the stars. Then, said projectile begins descending directly toward them. Finally, a hailstorm of debris falls as the object crashes to the ground, or lands because it's definitely not an object. It's the freaking Hulk sputtering nonsense about eating wizards and ruling the world. Wolverine and Deadpool freeze, seemingly in awe of their bad luck, while things back beneath Jameson's billboard don't look much better. Punisher's bloodlust kicks into high gear pretty early on, but so do the odds against them. As they're firing, Cap clutches at his head, and though it takes Frank a moment to notice, the Star-Spangled Man clings to his senses long enough to beg his companion, "I can't be like them. I can't be the enemy. God help me, Frank. Don't let me be the thing we fight. Please." In a panel for the ages, Punisher honors Cap's request by aiming his sidearm at the hero's head. Frank's final words sag with gravity. "You were always my hero." And like that, Captain America is gone, but Wolverine is decidedly not. Hulk does away with Deadpool but cannot shake the tenacious X-Man. With the aid of only one clawed hand, Wolverine waits for the Jade Giant to take a swing. The Hulk does, and Logan leaps into action. He jabs at the big man's hand, then quickly punctures his head. The sound of the blow is grotesque, but still not enough to sully the Hulk's will. He gives Wolverine a good smack, sending him soaring through the sky. The cannibal leader arrives at the seaport but finds it empty. Meanwhile, Wolverine suffers a rough landing but is admittedly given the better view. He rests in the crater that he made as the trucks carrying the research team speed past him, safely away from the Hulk. This chapter of war is bookended with the only image befitting such a conflict. Punisher, with his skull luminous and weapon in hand, striding into the unknown as a fireball turns the night into day. 2 years go by. The blazing cityscape has been replaced by the winter wastes of the North Pole. A facility of some sort is housed within the frozen walls of the tundra alongside connected spherical structures. Inside, Reed Richards and T'Challa have continued battling the epidemic and will begin conducting human trials for the antidote soon. Still, the population has been considerably reduced, and concerns regarding the availability of subjects are paramount. But these fears are promptly put to rest when the facility doors open up, revealing a total of 54 recovered survivors. T'Challa believes there to be more, to which Reed counters that there are also more cannibals. This doesn't faze the leader of the recovery party, who dismisses the threat of the monsters. "Don't sweat it. I can handle it." Wolverine, having endured the blizzard and regrown his arm in the interim, steps forward dragging some game. And just like that, the Marvel Universe suddenly felt nervous about going up against this little guy. What he does isn't very nice, but it's unmistakable that he's the best there is. What an awful thing to put Wolverine through. Hasn't the man experienced enough, like brainwashing, Weapon X, and general savagery? Marvel's answer was to pit nearly everyone against him. Again. We must all remember the events of Earth 11080 as it's a reminder of the massive grudge the Marvel Universe holds against their own heroes. Well everyone, that does it for this video. On behalf of Plot Armor Comics, thank you so much for watching. I've been Morse Code, you've been awesome, and we'll see you in the next video.